بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم إن الله عليم خبير.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين، واللعن الدائم على أعدائهم أجمعين. Dear viewers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. As you remember, in our previous session, I talked about emotivism. I defined emotivism as a school of thought that reduces moral principles to something like exclamation. According to them, moral statements are nothing but exclamatory marks. When you say it is good, it is as if you say hoorah for it. When you say something is bad, it is as if you say boo on it. Later on, I related the objections raised by moral scholars against this school of thought. I pointed out a number of objections, but the main objections were as these. This school of thought is self-refuting because this school of thought is based on logical positivism, and logical positivism is self-contradictory, and therefore this school of thought is also self-contradictory because it says that only empirical or analytic statements are the statements that are meaningful. Any other statements that do not fall within the category of these kinds of statements, they are not meaningful according to them. But we can ask them, is your claim that everything must be empirical, everything must be analytic, is this claim an analytic claim? Is this claim an empirical claim? If they are not, then there are statements that are meaningful, whereas they are not empirical nor analytic. So this was a very important rejection. Another rejection was that all moral principles are not reducible to exclamations. And if you reduce every kind of moral statements to a mere exclamation, then it will be something funny. For example, if you say that hoorah for good people, it is meaningful. But if you say hoorah for hoorah people, it is not meaningful. A good view, a better view is simpler and explains more. This is something that is accepted by scientific methodology. But again, here we cannot substitute better for hura, because if you put hura here, the whole sentence will be destroyed, and the methodology of science will be at risk. Because if you say a bit, instead of saying a better view, if you say a hura view is simpler and explains more. If you say such a statement, then this statement will be meaningless, having no meaning at all. So because of this, we said that this school of thought is not acceptable. And finally, we also pointed out the theory presented by Muslim scholars. Muslim scholars, as I mentioned before, are unanimous. They are agreed that all statements are either normative or descriptive. In other words, they are either indicative or descriptive. They are unanimous on this. But as far as moral statements are concerned, they are divergent on the issue of moral statements. The majority of Muslim scholars are of the view that moral statements fall under the category of normative statements, and they do not actually say anything about facts, and therefore we cannot talk about the falsity or truth of such kind of statements. These statements do not state facts, they do not express facts. But there are also scholars who are of the view, among the Muslims, who are of the view that moral statements are normative statements apparently, but in fact they are not normative statements. They can be reduced to statements that are fact based, and they can be statements that can be about truths. So these were the remarks that I made before. And tonight I'm going to introduce a new school of thought called prescriptivism. What is prescriptivism, and how does a moral statement be described according to this school of thought? What are the qualities of moral statements based on the point of view of this school of thought? According to prescriptivism, all statements, all sentences can be divided into two kinds. Some are indicative and some are prescriptive. The indicative types talk about the facts on the ground. They can be either true or false. You cannot say that they are totally right or totally wrong. They can be right and they can be wrong, and you can talk about it because they talk about facts. But as far as prescriptive statements are concerned, you cannot talk about it is falsity, nor can you talk about truth, because they are not related to the facts on the ground. They are related to your emotions, they are related to your will, they are related to your intentions. For example, if you say it is raining outside, as I said before, it could be an indicative statement, it could be a descriptive statement, because it talks about some reality that exists in the outside world. You can test it by going outside. If it was raining, then you can say, yes, it's raining. And if not, then you can say it is not raining. So you can test it. You can show the truth or falsity of such kind of statements. But there are also statements like you ought to do this, you ought not to do this, you must do this, you must not do that. These are prescriptive statements. They are neither true nor false, and they are not related to the facts on the ground. Therefore, you cannot talk about the truth or falsity of such kind of statements. But now let us look at moral statements. How do the prescriptivists describe moral statements? Are they indicative or prescriptive? According to this school of thought, all moral statements or all ought judgments, all these judgments are prescriptive. They do not talk about the facts. They are related to your feelings, they are related to your emotions, and they are related to your will. But remember that we agree, according to the prescriptivists, it is acceptable that moral judgments are not related to the facts. But still you can say that they are not totally devoid of truth. And therefore, according to prescriptivism, we can talk about matters such as racism. We can talk whether or not it is good to follow racism. According to some schools of thought which describe morality as mere feeling, you cannot talk about things such as racism. You cannot criticize racism. You cannot reject this school of thought. Nor are you able to talk about the truth of such a school of thought, because racism indicates your feelings and they are not related to the facts, and therefore you can neither defend it nor you can reject it. But based on the principles suggested by this school of thought, you can of course assess things such as racism. You can talk about genocide. You can talk about other issues. So yes, it is acceptable that moral issues are not based on facts and they are not related to facts on the ground. It is acceptable. But at the same time, remember that according to this school of thought, you can talk about things that are related to the realities on the ground. Moral principles are, as a matter of fact, related to your will. They are related to your intention. They express your will. They indicate your intention. So these are the qualities of a moral statement. But the most important quality of a moral statement, according to this school of thought, is that a moral statement must be universalized. You must be able to generalize or universalize a moral statement. If you are able to universalize a moral statement, then that moral statement is a real moral statement, and we can subscribe to that moral statement. We can propagate that moral statement. We can disseminate that moral statement. But if a moral statement cannot be universalized, if a moral statement cannot be generalized, then that moral statement must be shunned. That moral statement must be put aside. So this is the most important quality of a moral statement. But let us ask this question from this school of thought: how can we generalize a moral principle? How can we universalize a moral principle? They say you can do it by adhering to the principle of consistency. If you adhere to the principle of consistency, if you put into practice the principle of consistency, then you will be able to generalize a moral principle. You will be able to universalize a moral statement. But how can you apply this principle? How can you put into practice the principle of consistency? You can put into practice this principle by putting yourself in the place of others. Let me describe further. You make a judgment, you ought to do this. How can you make it universal? You can make it universal by saying, yes, let everybody do the same in similar cases. Let everybody do the same in similar cases. For example, you want to say that you must not smoke. Or for example, let's talk about something that is positive. Let's talk, eat chocolate, or eat that type of food, a special type of food. So you can say that you can prescribe the eating or having that special food. And then you can generalize it by saying that let everybody have that food. And in similar cases, if other peoples are like you in terms of color, in terms of sex, in terms of other qualities, then let us not make any difference between you and others. Whatever is good for you, it must be good for others. And whatever is bad for you, it must be bad for others. So this is a very important principle. By putting yourself in the place of others, you can come to know as to whether it is an acceptable principle or not. For example, let us face and let us have a dialogue with a racist. A racist is of the view that racism is good. But we can talk with them. If racism is a good idea, if racism is a good thing, then you must accept it yourself. For example, you, the racists, say that the black must be killed. If you are in the place of the black, then you must also be killed according to the consistency principle. Do you agree with being killed? If you agree with being killed, then you are a crazy person. You are not a wise person. You are a crazy. And if you do not agree with this situation, and at the same time, if you emphasize on your principle, it will backfire. It will say that you do not have any faith in consistency. While in our day-to-day life, in our day-to-day matters and everyday matters, we are always respecting the principle of consistency. In our dialogues, we want to adhere to this principle, because if we do not adhere to this principle, nobody will listen to us. Nobody will pay attention to what we say, because we do not respect the normal rules. We do not respect the normal norms. We do not respect the normal regulations. If we pay respect to all these principles, then we must also pay attention to the principle of consistency. So the principle of consistency will tell us, it will require us to prescribe a moral principle that is good for everybody, irrespective of their color, irrespective of their sex, and irrespective of their location. And based on this logic and based on this rationality, we can defend a moral system. So now let us have a deeper look on the qualities of a good moral principle. What or what are the qualities, what are the characteristics of a good moral principle. According to this school of thought, there are certain qualities that must be existing in every good moral principle. The first quality is that every moral principle must follow the methodology of freedom. The methodology it adopts must be a free methodology. It must not restrict your freedom. If a moral principle restricts your freedom, then it is not a good school of thought or a good moral principle. Look, for example, at cultural subjectivism. Cultural subjectivism was a very popular school of thought, but this school of thought does not satisfy this condition, because according to cultural relativism, it is the society that imposes its norms on you. It is the cultural norms that are imposed on you and that shape your morality. As far as you are concerned, you do not have any say in moral matters. As far as you are concerned, you cannot choose any moral principle. It is the society that imposes its values on you. It is the society that tells you what to do and what not to do. So this school of thought, relativism, actually restricts your freedom. Therefore, it is not a good school of thought. But as far as subjectivism is concerned, of course, subjectivism does satisfy this condition, because according to subjectivism, you act in accordance with your feelings. You always look at your feelings. What does your feeling tell you? What does your feeling order you? If your feeling tells you to do something, you will do it. And if your feeling tells you not to do something, you will not do it. So this is a very important condition, and this condition is satisfied by prescriptivism, because prescriptivism gives you the freedom to choose your moral principles. It tells you you are allowed, you are free to choose your moral principles, but it attaches one condition to your choice. It says whatever you choose, whatever you select, it must satisfy one condition. And that one condition is this: you must choose something that is acceptable by all. Treat others as you like to be treated. This is a very universal principle. This is a golden rule. Treat others as you like to be treated. So whatever you want to do, you must do, and whatever you want to choose. But look also at this condition: your choice must not be at the cost of the life of others. Your choice must not harm others. Your choice must not undermine the life or property of others. If you satisfy these conditions, then you are allowed to choose anything you want, and you are not restricted. Your choice is not limited. So this is one of the conditions. Another condition is that this school of thought, and a good school of thought, must be rational. If a school of thought is rational, of course, you can defend it. If a school of thought is not rational, and if it is merely emotional, then you cannot defend it. Look at subjectivism. Subjectivism is a good school of thought as far as the freedom of choice is concerned, because it gives the freedom of choice to its subscribers. It allows you to choose your moral principles. It gives you the freedom. But it is not rational. It says that you always keep looking at your feelings. Look at the gestures your feeling makes. Of course, it always requires you to listen to the voice of your feelings. But of course, it is not rational to listen to your feelings, because some of your feelings are of course rational, while others are not rational. If you get hungry, you must answer the call of nature. But of course, if you want And if you like to kill others, you must not agree with this kind of feeling. You must not agree with this kind of desire. You must not implement this kind of desire. So feelings are not always rational. Sometimes they are rational and sometimes they are not rational. Some of them are rational while others are not rational. So we must base our rational our principles, our moral principles on rationality. If we base our principles on rationality, out will come prescriptivism. Prescriptivism is the product of a free methodology and a rational methodology. If you follow a free methodology and if you follow a rational methodology, you will be necessarily led to prescriptivism, and you will be led to this conclusion that prescriptivism is a good school of thought and it has to be accepted. This school of thought is, of course, better than any other school of thought, because if you reach this stage, it is a very important step forward, because by reaching at this stage, you will be able to say that you have reached the stage of impartiality in ethics. If you reach the stage of impartiality in ethics, then of course the judgments you produce, the judgments you make will be valuable and will be acceptable. Of course, there is a resemblance, a similarity between this school of thought and the ideal observer, because both these schools of thought are emphasizing and both are stressing on the principle of impartiality. If the moral principles originate in impartiality, if they are not biased, if they are not prejudiced, then they are acceptable. Of course, if you place yourself in the place of others, if you put yourself in the place of others, you try to observe the principle of impartiality. And impartiality is nothing other than ignoring your sole interest. If you keep in mind the interests of others, if you keep in mind the benefits of others, and if you are not restricted to your own benefits, then of course you are the one who are respecting the principle of impartiality. Thank you very much.
Allah ya Allah, Allah subhanallah, Allah ya Allah, Allah hamdan lillah.